Hello friends, welcome to my channel Sushant Chesswise. Today we have the next lesson, that is the theoretical Rook Endgames, and we are going to have a look at a very important position. It's a case of Rook's pawn and the pawn is on the 6th rank. So far we have studied the positions, all positions with the pawn on 7th rank where the Rook is standing in front of the pawn. So this is the position Black to play, and things look very tricky for Black at the moment. When the pawn is on 7th rank, we know that the king cannot move to the f7, e7 or d7 squares, because with the pawn on 7th rank, the rook then moves away, and in the skewer we are able to get the opponent's rook. So the move king f7 is not that great. Another fact, we know that now the pawn is on 6th rank, so harassing the king with checks will allow the king to establish on the a7 square. When the rook will move to b8, then the king will move to b7, a8 and a7. So this will require just 3 moves, and in 3 moves the king will not reach c7. So that position will arise with the pawn on the 7th rank, where the king is required on the c7 square. Let's play the moves and see. After rook f1 check, ke4, rook e1 check, kd5, rook d1 check, kc6, rook c1 check, kb7, rook b1 check, king a7. First the king sits in front of the pawn, he hides there. After kf7, rook attacks the rook, rook moves to a1, so that king cannot come to 8. But then white uses the zigzag method, king moves to b7, if ke7 then a7 comes. So a7, and here after rook b1 check, the king is not even placed on the d7 square, but the king is required near. And now what happens? King simply sidesteps the path. So after king a6, rook a1, kb6, rook b1, kc6, and the king moves aside and the position is gone. And we already know that even with the king on d7 or d6, the king would have, if the king is on d6, then the king hides on c8. And still it manages to sidestep after rook b6. I have discussed this position in great detail in my earlier chapter, so we are not venturing into that right now. So this technique of giving check will not lead to draw. Another problem is the move king f7. Now white has to play little carefully. If he plays a7 immediately, then black will come to know the plan. He will rush back to g7 and the rook starts giving check. This time there is no place on the a7 square, so the game will be drawn. So king cannot hide there. White first plays ke4, trying to pull the king further near. Now after ke7, white just goes a7, and we see that the position is now doomed, because again if he goes kf7 or d7 wherever, white has rook h8. After rook h8, rook a7, rook check, and the rook is lost. So white will win over there. After ke4, if black tries to cut the king's path and white has not played a7 yet, then what white will do? White will take the king along and he will not play a7 till the black king has come in the middle. Okay, so we don't want the black king to go to the g7 square then. So white just plays kd4. Now ke7 similarly allows a7, so the king might go back to g7 first. Now kc4. And we see that now the tempo gained will be very useful. After king f7, kb4, the rook is attacked. If the rook moves away, then a7 comes and the rook will move and the pawn will queen. So rook has to be on the a1 square, and now we reach the previous position. King goes to b1, rook b1 check, kc6, rook c1 check, kb7. Now the rook is ready to leave, so rook b1 check, king a7, and we see the black king is still caught on the e7 square only. So comes rook b8, rook a1, kb7, rook b1 check, king a8, rook a1, a7, kd7. This time the king managed to come to the d7 square, but now after king b7, rook b1 check, king a6, rook a1 check, kb6, rook b1 check, king c5, and the king escapes. And the position is winning for white. What should black do? So for many years this position was considered winning for white. But in 1924, the player named Vancura, he discovered a different way to draw this position, and this position is very famous. Although when we see the solution, it looks very easy, but to spot it beforehand was quite difficult. So the theoretical result of the position came out very late, I would say. Black now shifts the path of the rook. He plays rook f1 check, k e4, and places the rook on the 6th rank. This is a very important technique. Now what he is doing, moment the pawn moves to a7, he will sit behind the pawn, and then again rook goes to a1, and the rook keeps on giving check. So we reach our standard theoretical position. The white rook cannot move because a6 would be taken. So king will remain here and the rook will remain on the 6th rank till the white king touches the a pawn. So after kd5, rook just waits on b6, kc5, rook f6. Generally the rook should not go behind the king. It's safer to be on f6. The rook can give check easily. And now as soon as the king comes to b5, white is ready to free his rook. Now rook can come to c8 and c6, and then the pawn's advance will begin. But then black starts giving check. The same technique which we follow from behind now works from the side. So after kb6, rook check, ka7, we see that the king cannot hide on a7 anymore. That is the reason the rook shouldn't go behind. Then rook h7 check won't be available. So kb6, rook check, kb5, rook check, king c4. Now king is away from the pawn and the rook returns again to the f6 square and the position is drawn. So this was a very important contribution by Vancura, we can say, and I hope you will find these lessons useful and instructive. Do like, share and subscribe the channel. Thanks for your time.